An AWS NAT Gateway can charge you before it moves a byte. Then it charges for every gigabyte. And depending on the route, transfer can join the bill. That is the so-called NAT Gateway tax. Tax is shorthand here. These are service charges, not a literal tax. But the nickname sticks because one innocent box in an architecture diagram can put several different meters on the bill. Start with the meter most people forget: time. AWS bills. A NAT gateway for every hour it is provisioned. A partial hour counts as a full one. The byte counter can sit at 0, and this meter still moves. In US East Ohio, the public rate retrieved on July 13, 2026 was 4.5 cents per gateway hour. Keep one zonal NAT gateway provisioned for a 730-hour month, and the time meter is $32.85. That is not a disaster by itself. It is the cover charge. Traffic has not entered the building yet. Now move data through the gateway and the second meter wakes up. AWS calls this NAT gateway data processing. It is billed for each gigabyte processed, regardless of the traffic source or destination, not per packet. The packet on screen is just a visual stand-in for all the bytes accumulating behind it. In the same Ohio pricing example, processing is 4.5 cents per gigabyte. 1,000 gigabytes through the gateway creates $45 of processing, on top of whatever share of the hourly meter belongs to that workload. Here is the part that catches people. The destination can have free transfer and the NAT detour can still cost money. AWS's own example sends an EC2 workload to S3 in the same region and the same availability zone. The data transfer charge in that example is 0, but because the path goes through the NAT gateway, the processing meter still records the bytes, and the time meter is still running. The destination was not expensive. The route to it was. This is where the clean slogan becomes dangerous. AWS says standard data transfer charges can also apply to data sent through a NAT gateway. Can apply. The third row depends on the path. Put a workload in one availability zone and point it to a zonal NAT gateway in another, and AWS documents data transfer charges between them. Draw both resources in the same zone, and that particular cross-zone layer disappears. Send traffic to the public internet, across regions, through transit gateway, or through an inspection appliance, and different transfer economics can enter the picture. So no, AWS does not charge every packet 3 times. It meters gateway time, it meters bytes processed, and the route can activate another transfer charge. The architecture decides whether that third light turns on. And if your NAT cost explainer stops at deploy 1 gateway per availability zone, it is now missing a product change. In November 2025, AWS introduced Regional NAT Gateway. It can expand into the availability zones where your workloads run and maintain zonal affinity automatically. That reduces the need to manage a separate zonal gateway in every zone. Cross-zone NAT processing is now a configuration or transition case, not an inevitable feature of the service. Regional does not mean 1 hourly charge for the whole region. AWS bills 1 NAT gateway hour for each availability zone where the regional NAT is configured. At the Ohio rate, 3 active zones over 730 hours produce $98.55 in gateway time before processing and any applicable transfer. And there are boundaries. AWS recommends regional NAT for use cases other than private connectivity. Private NAT remains zonal. Automatic expansion can also take up to 60 minutes, so a newly used zone can temporarily process traffic across zones while expansion completes. The new product makes the architecture easier. It does not collapse all the meters into one price. Now return to that same region S3 stream. AWS provides an S3 gateway endpoint. For this supported path, the endpoint has no additional hourly or data processing charge, and the traffic no longer needs the NAT gateway. Change the route table, and the S3 stream peels away from the NAT path. The NAT processing row for that stream stops growing. The unnecessary detour disappears. That is a counterfactual, not a universal recommendation. Gateway endpoints cover S3 and DynamoDB. Interface endpoints have their own hourly and processing economics. Use an endpoint is not a complete cost analysis until the service, endpoint, type, volume, and route are specified. The useful part of this anatomy is that the layers leave different evidence. Cost Explorer and the Cost and Usage Report show the charge. CloudWatch exposes NAT gateway byte, packet, connection, and error metrics at 1-minute intervals. VPC flow logs help identify who is sending traffic and where it is going. AWS also documents alarms built from bytes out to destination. None of those guarantees a cheap architecture, and the observability can have costs of its own. They do separate a time problem from a volume problem and a routing problem. One icon. 3 different questions. One supporting line item sits outside the 3-meter mechanism. A public IPv4 address on the gateway is separately billable. AWS's documented formula works out to $3.65 for one address over a 730-hour month in the same dated Ohio example. Keep it in the audit notes, not in the opening model. The NAT gateway tax is not one mysterious surcharge. It is a time meter, a byte meter, and sometimes a route meter. Since November 2025, Regional NAT changes the cross-zone story, but not the need to price the exact path. The packet was only the tour guide. AWS bills the accumulated gigabytes. Cost anatomy opens the boxes that quietly decide what technology costs. Subscribe for the next autopsy.